Welcome to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. Thank you so much for joining us. For the past 8-ish years now, What's Working has focused on workplace, workforce, and marketplace trends. If you're a regular listener to the show, you've certainly heard me say that many times. But it's been recently that I've thought this show may need to evolve, and not to abandon what we've done in the past, but to add something to it. Our political landscape today is something that, quite frankly, does not make me very proud. And there are those perhaps that are listening that have no objections or anything wrong at all with the political landscape. I don't like it. I don't like the anger. I don't like the accusations. I don't like the loyalty that I see to an individual versus to the nation or to the Constitution. And in a moment of frustration several months ago, I said, well, if I'm so upset, what do I do? If I'm so angry or disappointed or bothered, what do I do? It was when I felt this way that I began this podcast that ultimately became a radio show and is now back into its podcast form only. I was upset about my lack of connectivity to the community and to the city in which I lived. So I proposed What's Working to a friend at 106.5 FM, and he granted it, and we had a wonderful run with that show. Various things have changed in my business world, and it's no longer a radio show and back into a podcast. But the point being, it was a moment of frustration and helplessness that I created this. That same moment of frustration and helplessness has found me again, and it's not about my connectivity to the community. It's about our nation and our state, all of it. And for that reason, What's Working is going to take a shift in tone here as I begin to explore opportunities for our nation and our state in the political world. Let me be clear. I'm not exploring being a candidate, but I want to have the conversations about politics, about our obligation, our duty. I've been introduced to a number of different people across the state and beyond who have some strong opinions about what we can do as a nation, one of which is to begin a third party. Goodness knows we've heard those conversations in the past. They've never really worked. They dilute votes versus gather votes. And people would say, Cam, that's not worked in the past. And my reaction is, and I truly believe this to be true, it's different this time. It really is different this time. So you'll hear conversations on What's Working about third parties and representing, getting different voices through the podcast to talk about their positions and discuss what they can do to remedy the problem. I have had to my address sent anonymous letters saying, Cam, stay away from politics. I've had notes and emails sent as best as they could be anonymously saying, keep your nose out of this. You have kind of a clean reputation, their notes would say, and you need to stay away from politics. It will tarnish you. It will tarnish your reputation, and it will tarnish your show. And for those of you, perhaps you're listening, that have sent those notes, thank you. I'm choosing to do differently now. I'm choosing to address these things head on. I am, as I said before, disgusted by the way I see our nation functioning. I'm disgusted by the interaction between the parties. I'm disgusted by the positions of the parties. And for that reason, a third party is of interest to me right now. This show is going to take on, What's Working is going to take on a different approach beginning now. And my first guest in this vein will be Kyle Sweetser. He's on his way to the studio as I record this. He's running to replace Tommy Tuberville as Tuberville campaigns for governor. And Kyle has sent me some information in advance. I've been studying his posts. I've been reading his website. And we're going to ask him what in the world he thinks. Why does he think that a Democrat, he's running as a Democrat, why does he think a Democrat has a snowball's chance in heck in this state right now? And what opportunities does he see? These are questions that normally Working would not have attacked. We're going to attack it this time. So for those of you who are fans of the show, you're going to hear a change in tone here. We'll continue to interview the business people, but we're also going to touch on the politics. And it is, goodness knows, It can be a third rail in our society, but I'm tired. I cannot sit around and say any longer, what do I do? This is the lever I have to pull, and it's a very small one. I recognize it, but I'm going to pull it. I'm going to pull it. When we come back from break, I'll have Kyle Sweetser. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. This is Cam Marston. Poor communication is costing your business, and it's because many leaders don't have the skills to communicate well. Productivity's sinking, and you're losing sales. Teams are frustrated. So I created the Generational Insights Communications Academy to train leaders to communicate effectively with anyone in any situation. Fix communication breakdowns, build the company you deserve. Enroll your leaders today at cammarston.com/GICA. We're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. So grateful for you sticking around. As I promised in the introduction, you're hearing new content out of What's Working. While we've kind of moved away from the 100% business focus and are now talking politics, I think this political conversation will have great business relevance. Kyle Sweetser is sitting across from me. He's the first time I've had a candidate for the U.S. Senate in this office, and I'm flattered and honored that he be willing to sit down with me. Kyle, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to What's Working.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity here.
This is going to be fun and exploratory for both of us, I think. So your background, as I found online, includes a lot of work. Why don't you bring the listeners up to date on what is your background? Who are you? Where do you come from? And then we'll get into your decision to run for the Senate.
Absolutely. So I'm from Mobile, Alabama. I was born and raised here. I graduated from Baker High School and, grew up with a construction background. I grew up helping my dad on the weekend. I grew up as early as I can remember assembling garage door openers for my dad at our house. And when I was 4 years old, now I don't know if I put them together right at the time. He never told me. But so I've always, been one to get involved and work with my hands, and worked hurricanes growing up, worked Katrina in high school. I worked Ivan for a couple of weeks as well when we were out for school. A lot of that work is doing garage doors, overhead doors, metal building framing, all types of repair work. So I'm in and out of all types of companies. I'm in and out of all types of manufacturing facilities. I've been in and out of all types of businesses, chemical plants, residential homes, you name it.
Yeah. So it was a youth of working of hands-on stuff. What made you say? When did you develop an interest in politics? I can't imagine that at a teenager going around town working with garage doors and things of that nature, politics was high on your list. It certainly wasn't mine. Where did this interest come from?
I think out of a necessity.
Oh.
To, do something to change the direction of our country.
Yeah.
For everything that was happening in the community, from talking to folks, seeing the direction that our country was going, watching something like January 6th take place with little to no accountability. And just knowing that I had to do something. When you see tariffs affect the 2018 steel tariffs, I got to see how those work. When you see those tariffs affect prices and you understand them in advance, you have a little bit of different of perspective than some folks. So those steel tariffs hit our industry first.
You're talking about the garage door industry.
Garage doors, roll-up doors, specialty items, finished steel products. Seeing price increases from that immediately, I knew that, hey, folks don't really know the truth about these tariffs.
Yeah.
Folks don't know that they increase costs. Folks don't know that the cost ends up going to small businesses and consumers. And, when the government goes and rigs markets in the way that they're doing this, they're harming small businesses. It's at the expense of small businesses and the vast majority of folks in Alabama and the vast majority of folks in our country. So they had these policies that weren't being checked because our representatives, our senators, became rubber stamps for a party. They became rubber stamps for the
I'm
president.
going to interrupt you. I definitely want to get into this. So
Okay.
let's move to let's wait in a moment or two to get into your platform and tell me a little bit more about your background. One of the things that which precedes you is that you are a traditional historical Republican, as am I. And the values of the Republican Party, which I was so enamored with years ago, are no longer visible in that party anymore. And some say it's for the better. I say it's for the worse. And you flipped from the Republican side to the Democrat side. Tell me about that. That can't have been an easy decision.
Well, that was something that took place over the years, really. And I think, in 2016 with Trump, I looked at Trump, and I know many folks looked at Trump as like some way to shake things up, especially when you live in Alabama and, we're continually last place in so many areas like life expectancy and infant mortality rates and poverty. And you walk around pretty much ripping your hair out, wanting things to be better. You don't want to be last place anymore. I'm proud of Alabama. I'm proud of the people here, and I want us to climb the ladder. I don't want us to be last place anymore. So when Trump came along, I looked at him as that was sort of, already kind of moving, I guess you could say, in a way that, hey, why aren't we being served here? Because we weren't being served. So that's sort of what led to it. But man, the values that I held, I assumed because Trump was on that platform that he was going to adhere to those values, those American values, instead of moving towards protectionism, isolationism, nativism. That's not the United States. That's not our country. Moving away from the Constitution. To him, looking at it as a former Republican, the Constitution was big. It was huge for me and many folks who are Republicans. Now they've abandoned it. It's an annoyance to the Republican Party.
Can I safely assume that in Trump's first term or first iteration through president, you voted for him the first time?
Yes. So I voted for him in the primary in 2016, and I voted for him in the general election in 2016.
And you have since become, like, as have many people, quite disillusioned with what you got.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of it goes back to, a lot of folks, they're very busy, especially here in Alabama. They work many hours. Some folks work 2 jobs, to get by. And so when you're working so much, and in the past I worked, out in the field, 72 hours a week, as much as I could, any job that I could get, Sunday, holidays, just wide open, everything that I could go after. So when your nose is to the grindstone, like many people down here, where you're just trying to get by, you're trying to do better for your family, you're not paying attention to some of this rhetoric. So once you're able to snap out of it, once you're able to go back and look at some of these things that Trump has said that hasn't been digested by, maybe a major media outlet that you listen to, you realize that you've been lied to. You've been betrayed. Our trust, the Republican vote in Alabama has been completely taken for granted. So they haven't served any of their constituents in the way that they're supposed to. And as I said, they've abandoned their principles and values. They've abandoned the Constitution. They've abandoned law and order. They've abandoned the people. And it even rolls into foreign policy and how they've put us in a dangerous position.
I'm going to interrupt you again. Please forgive me, but
No
I want to make sure these issues that we're talking about get it addressed, but kind of address one thing at a time here. And the next one is what you've made some great points, and I don't disagree. I agree with everything you've said. Is there any indication, any polling data, anything that suggests that a Democrat can win statewide in Alabama? Is there any hope in this world? I have to imagine you have seen something or at least feel something. Otherwise, you wouldn't have put your name on the ballot like you have. Why do you think a Democrat has a chance?
Number one, it has to be done. Somebody has to do it. Somebody has to stand up, and no one will do it. Sitting down, sitting on our hands and not doing anything is no longer an option. It has to be done. We need an effective government. Our Senate has just completely, the power of the people has been abandoned for a rubber stamp. So talking to folks, hearing folks, starting to question things. For one, you get in a conversation, a lot of people don't agree. A lot of Republicans, many Republicans don't agree with what's happening with immigration. They don't agree with the government snatching people up off the street without due process. They don't agree with the fact that the Republican Party and this administration is probably the most fiscally irresponsible administration, in the history of the United States now. So many folks are starting to wake up to this fact. But when you look at these policies, specifically in Alabama, and how we're being affected, and how this administration during the campaign promised all of these things like lowering costs, like ending the war in Ukraine on day one.
Yeah, there's a giant list of promises that were made. And it seems to me from what I read, there are people out there that understand Trump's hyperbole and that he'll never get this stuff. He'll never get it done. He just blusters. And there are people like me that say, well, you've committed to this. Let's see it. And there's been none of that. So I agree. I'm with your frustration. I certainly understand that. Why Democrat and why not an independent run? Because there are people I feel in this state that touching anything with the D label to it just gives them the hives, whereas there may have been a greater opportunity as an independent. So why did you choose to go Democrat versus independent? Not green, but I'm trying to think of any other third parties. Why Democrat versus independent?
We have no empathy in our politics here because we're ruled by folks that they don't care about the people. And so I want to bring empathy back to statewide politics in Alabama. I want that to be represented. I want us to think carefully about the decisions that we make as elected officials and how they affect the folks that live here in Alabama. And I don't think that there's a better way to do that than through the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. You and I talked before the microphones were on. Many of the historic positions taken by these two parties have flip-flopped, that they have inverted themselves. I remember reading The Economist magazine many times and them talking about the value of lower and lower tariffs, lower and lower trade values, and it was a value at the time of the Republican Party. Today, as we well know, the Republican Party has embraced tariffs, even to the detriment of the people that they are supposed to serve. So there's a great opportunity, as you've said. I think there's a Republican out there that likes what you're saying. However, they're struggling to hit that. They'll fill in that oval that says D next to it. And you felt that the Democrat approach was the best one to go forward. Have you sensed support from the Democrat Party, or are they, in a national sense, or the Democrats saying, that background as a Republican makes us a bit nervous?
Well, I've had as much as support that I could ever imagine. So many folks have supported me right when I launched. I had a lot of folks, share my launch video, and I've had very good feedback.
Yeah, and so you've got that support there. Have you heard, I don't know how this works, is there a national Democratic Party that has reached out to you and said, how can we help, or can we give you some strategy, or how has your support from the Democratic Party in large been reflected?
I have had a couple meetings.
Yeah,
I've had a few meetings, and so far just some advising, but it's very promising, especially down here so early in Alabama, where national folks have been disinterested in Alabama. Now people are looking at our state.
Yeah. So they think there's a chance. They, like you, think there's a chance. Are there others out there that you're aware of nationally that have perhaps changed parties and are running with the same motivations that you have? Is there like a club, an unofficial club of people that are trying to disrupt things?
Well, I would say there's a group called Principles First that participated in 2 speaking events as a speaker, and some of the folks in that group one, the former lieutenant governor, Geoff Duncan, over in Georgia. He's now running for governor as a Democrat. And if you don't know about him, they helped certify the election. He had to have, I believe, armed guards all around him for that. So he chose to do the right thing over party politics. And, now he's running as a Democrat in the primary over there for governor. Yeah. So that's one. You also have Jolly over in Florida, who's running for governor.
As a former Republican.
As a former Republican.
Yeah. So the Republican Party, while in great strength nationally right now, is losing key people, let's say, because of this wayward tack that they've taken.
Absolutely, because they've abandoned the Constitution, because they've abandoned the people, and they're doing horrific things with their power. When you look at what they're doing with like I said, snatching people up off the street without due process.
Yeah. It's awful. I used to read about people being disappeared in Argentina, and even in Chile, the Pinochet days. But I never thought it would happen here. I do want to talk about this, but first. Most people enter politics not at a U.S. Senate race. I mean, you've jumped into the deep end fast. They start with dog catcher. They start with city council. They start with something more moderate. And you've gone big fast. Tell me what you've learned in a very short amount of time and how you're structuring your campaign.
Yeah, so there's a lot to it. These days there's a lot of rules. There's a lot of components and pieces that you have to learn about. And so jumping straight into this, learning all those things at once, it can be a challenge, but I love the challenge. I love to fight. And, so I've put everything into it. So as far as structuring the campaign goes, we started out kind of rolling out with just a few people. We got a digital firm. We've got, the compliance that we need. And now we've brought on a few people this week. So, we now have the ability to fundraise the way that we should. We have a fundraiser and I have a comms person and, I have a senior strategist as well. And so senior advisor. And so these components are in place to really, push us forward this quarter. We've got some lofty goals and I'm excited to get after it.
Yeah, you can't do this a little bit. Not too long ago, in that very chair was the Mobile mayor-elect Spiro Chirigatis, and he didn't have a plan B. At least he didn't let people know that he had a plan B. He quit his job, and he ran for mayor without a plan B, without a fallback position. Do you have a fallback position, or is it back to garage doors if things don't play out for you? What's the plan?
This is the plan. This has 100% of the focus of myself and my family. I'm fully supported by my wife. We're running this until the wheels fall off, wide open.
Where are the most opportunities for votes in the state of Alabama? I've been following you on social media, and you have been laying down the miles across the state of Alabama. A private plane would be a welcome thing to your lifestyle right now, I would suspect. But you seem to spend a lot of time in the northern quarter of the state. Tell me about that.
So just working up there, folks are motivated. There's some organization up there to really, get out the vote when we need it. And so trying to hit those places early, I think is very important. Also, I'm really gonna hammer where we live here in Lower Alabama, Mobile and Baldwin County. You look at Mobile and Mobile should be blue. The reason why it's not blue is because we haven't had, a good platform. We haven't had a good shot here, or a good candidate for the state of Alabama. And so, looking at Mobile County specifically, I want to flip Mobile County. I know that we can do it. And there's some other counties as well. I don't want to give my whole strategy, but I've got a huge list. I know exactly how many votes we need to win.
That's the way you have to do it. Now, you've mentioned something I think that deserves to be discussed. Upcoming on this podcast, I will interview former governor of Oklahoma, Frank Keating. I've been introduced to him, and he is a Republican that is, like you and me, Frank is not, Governor Keating has not flipped, but he is distressed by what he sees. So he'll be on the show here in a couple of weeks. But one of it, he says, his comment is he still has hope in the Republican Party. But the problem, he said, is the quality of the candidate. And if the Republican Party would recruit a more character-driven, integrity-driven candidate, then the former Republican Party, as you and I remember it, still has a chance. You appear to me to be a man of ethic, of character, of working background. You're not doing it for attention and celebration, from what I can see. Talk to me about the quality of the candidate. And you mentioned that Mobile County has not had a quality candidate out there. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so we need people in politics that have experienced life. And we've gotten away from that. So, I mean, the struggle. And when you don't have folks that have come from, the lower end, I guess you could say, you have this disconnect. So I think it is about character. It's about all these other things, but that character I think that we need is built through hard work, is built through the struggle, is built through going to sleep. The last thing in your mind is, how do I provide a better life for my family? And then waking up the next morning and that being your first thought, what can I do better? And, achieving that through having to work over 72 hours, a week and having to, I've done a lot of work across the coast during hurricane response work. And, you do it because it's really hard work. It's really challenging work. A lot of folks, they think they want to do it and they get into disaster response, but they essentially, pay people to chop up logs and throw them in a back of the truck. That's not what I do. I go out in places that are tore up, that are dangerous, that have, halfway destroyed buildings and get huge roll-up doors off of like UPS trucks or FedEx trucks or fire trucks so they can get out. And a lot of the work that I've done is hard work. So getting people in office, I think it's so important that every party starts to focus on bringing real people in that have experienced the hardships of life. So we get that representation that we need. What happened to the Republican Party is the Republican Party came out of touch. And to me, that's why it went the direction that it went. And somebody like Donald Trump was able to come into power. So
you've made a couple of points there. The candidates that have experienced life. You are a candidate, from what you've said, that has experienced life. Contrast that with the other candidates. Right now, you're vying to replace the role of Tommy Tuberville's Senate spot. Has he not experienced life? Are your competitors for this same Senate seat people who have not experienced life? Tell me about that.
Well, I would say that Tommy Tuberville is somebody that experiences life in a different aspect than the majority of folks that live here. In a big way, in a stadium. When I've went out in my life, where all of my political experience comes from is work, I go in and out of people's homes. I talk to people where they're comfortable, not out in public, not where people are on their best behavior. And people tell you what they believe. And so hearing behind closed doors in homes and businesses and having all these discussions across the political spectrum in all communities, I think it's super important. And I think it's something that's been lost.
Mm-hmm. So one of the reasons, something else you said, one of the reasons the Republican Party, you said, has come out of touch. Nevertheless, Donald Trump touched something that people perked up. He touched something that made you vote for him the first time. So perhaps you claim they're out of touch. Others would claim, no, they were actually very much in touch. Define for me the difference between the two.
So I would just say that they didn't represent the common experience, and that's what led to Donald Trump. I would say that, maybe the language that Donald Trump used where, we know the rhetoric now. I know the rhetoric was bad, but a lot of that language where he sort of shot from the hip all the time, that's why people liked him, because he came off, even though he's a billionaire, he came off as sort of a regular person leading into it. Now, I will say that I was 100% the principle behind the principles and values of the Republican Party. What they did, or what they said, at least when you look at McCain and how McCain dealt with a heckler over Obama. There's a famous scene. I think it was a birther person came up and he said Obama was a great American or something along those lines. You look at George Bush and he said great things about immigrants as well. He spoke out against the incoming protectionism, nativism, and isolationism. I want to say that was in 2013, maybe a little sooner. Then you look at Ronald Reagan and his famous speech where, he talked, for one, Ronald Reagan was pro-free trade, pro-Ukraine, pro-strong defense and deterrence in Europe. These things that mattered to me, having a Republican Party that represented, to me, the sanity, the law and order, and a world where, we kind of kept things in check. Because when we haven't kept things in check in the past, we've had these major wars. Mm-hmm. And so moving away from that, I believe has put us in this position that we are globally, where we are basically being attacked by Russia. They're hitting NATO territory. They've hit NATO territory because we've eroded our deterrent. When you don't have both parties speaking out on the behalf of this longstanding foreign policy, when we don't have that unity there, and I get there's not always going to be unity, but when it comes to that case with Russia and Russian aggression, you look at how the Republican Party used to be.
I think Russia's dancing right now. They're like, this country's eroded. They've lost their backbone. They're fat and fluffy, and they're focusing on ridiculous things. And as long as they are, we're going to excel, Russia is saying. So a couple more questions before we get into the changes I want to hear you talk about that you're eager to make. You mentioned Obama. Obama's campaign did some remarkable things. Whether you liked him or not, you have to look at the success of the way he campaigned. He was very good at engaging the youth. He was very good at getting like Venmo. I don't know if we had Venmo at the time, but people making very small, nearly insignificant contributions to his campaign. But what it did for the individual sending $5 to Obama was bought them in. I'm giving money to this guy. I don't need to give $10,000. I have given $5 to the campaign, and now I'm in. And I'm going to tell my friends. I've even given money. So I'm curious about the Obama campaign. He ran a masterful campaign. Again, you don't have to like him, but you can't deny that. And second one is the Trump campaign. Both of them have things that they've done well, whether you like the candidate or not. And as you look at your own campaign across the state of Alabama, what of their tactics could you say, you know what? The Sweetser campaign could use that. Are there ideas that you're stealing from previous candidates that are very effective today?
So I look at it like we keep moving forward. So I think it's always going to continue to change. Strategy is always going to continue to change. So looking at the most effective recent strategy, I know Obama was very effective then. Obama had, I think a great email program, if I'm not mistaken. And there have been constraints on like someone like me creating an email program. You start out, you can only send out 50 emails a day starting out, no matter how many people sign up for your list. And if you...
Who regulates that?
I believe Google.
No kidding. Oh, yeah. It's a technology limit versus a campaign limit. It's not a political limit.
Yeah, I believe.
Okay.
So, but that's handled by our digital team. So you have to ramp it up very slowly to where you can get to the point where you can actually get to everyone.
Yeah.
So, so that's why I'm saying, now moving forward, you look at the Trump campaign 2024 versus the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party had a huge ground game. A lot of folks involved in the ground, which I still think is very important. And the Trump campaign just did everything through social media, did everything through text messages, did everything through media. And they have a very influential group of influencers, podcasters, and folks that just make content that are affiliated with Trump in some way and affiliated with the Republican Party. And so they were able to, especially with Elon Musk's help in the America PAC, they were able to use things like, I think, micro-targeting, where they're able to target certain folks. The America PAC put out, and this is how wild it's become, opposing advertisements. The posters looked almost identical depending on where you were at. And they had one that had painted the Democratic Party or Kamala Harris as pro-Palestine for one group of people. And then at the same time, they had almost an identical photo and everything, but different colors. And then it had her pro-Israel. And so they ran this ad at the same time. That's what we're up against. So being able to dig into data, being able to use data, being able to micro-target areas and, use our resources as best as possible. So like in Huntsville, talking about the space program there, targeting those folks there and making it about those issues there, which I support. And I'm not going to do what Elon Musk, the America PAC did, but that's how we start to do things. We look at each area, we break that data down. How do we max voter turnout here? What do people care about here? And we can target them through social media, through media in a way that hasn't been done before, really, I think, until Trump's 2024 campaign.
Let's take this Kamala Harris example that you just gave me. One ad says she's pro-Palestine. Nearly the same identical ad says she's pro-Israel. It was placed in appropriate places to get voters. Is that ethical to you? Is that strategy or is that unethical?
Unethical. It's wrong.
Period.
100% it's wrong.
Yeah. I would suspect that one of the challenges you'll have in the state of Alabama is, I suspect, the most popular television show around here is going to be something on Fox News. I can tell within 5 minutes of whether people watch Fox News or not. If Fox News gets this sniff that you're actually going to knock this seat off, they're coming after you. And they don't play by the rules. They've admitted in court that they're entertainment, not news. But the people that watch Fox News, they don't believe that. They think this is the gospel. And I have, unfortunately, family members who quote it chapter and verse on a regular basis. How do you plan to bully up against such an enormous powerhouse as that organization? Should things start looking your way, or perhaps they are, perhaps Fox News has already identified you. But if they fear a turn in Washington, suddenly you're in their crosshairs. And while it's flattering on one sense to think that this organization could think that you're a threat, on the other sense, their gloves are off. They don't play by the rules. Their ethics and character and integrity are not things that they seem to that they cherish. What is your reaction to that? What happens when they come?
Well, I've been trained on this for the past 2 years through social media and threats. That I was targeted pretty heavily for speaking at the DNC, for being in the crosshairs of many folks, for interrupting Republican messaging. And, I've received, my wife and I can't even, maybe hundreds of some form of threats. My wife has received direct threats to her phones. Look, we're ready for this. I'm not gonna back down. As I said before, somebody's got to do something for our state. This is something to me that is a calling, and I'm not gonna quit fighting, no matter who comes after me, no matter what kind of dirty tricks they play. It's just a matter of having a spine and standing up.
Do you have a megaphone as loud as the Fox News megaphone?
I don't, but if they make a mistake, they might accidentally give me one.
The FBI has been corrupted, let's say. The FBI has been hijacked by the Oval Office. The FBI is responsible, as I understand, for reacting to death threats. Are they helping you in this regard?
So I will say that, I didn't have any help at all, but I did post online a threat to my wife. I didn't post the whole threat, but it was pretty horrible, that came in through her phone. And at the same time, I think the day before that, we were hacked by Russia 6 times from Russian IP addresses. It was like a full-on social media attack. I had different things come out. I think one had 1.5 million views across the U.S. and it said that I owned all the roads in Mobile. but
that would be nice.
But look, I'm ready for this, and this intimidation tactic, what they've done to the Republicans that have stood up. I come from a working background. I have cuts and scars all over me. I played football good chunk of my life. I actually did MMA. I had one fight here in Mobile, and when I was younger, and I had one in Ohio that I lost at one point, and Cleveland. And then I got married. So I'm a fighter. Okay. I walk straight into it, and I'm going to keep going until I got every last breath. I'm going to use every last breath, every drop of blood in me to fight against these folks. I'm not afraid of them. I'm going to keep coming.
Have you reached out to the FBI to say, can you help us with this?
So the FBI did contact me. So at some point, I went on a podcast for Sarah Longwell up in D.C., and I had mentioned that I had received death threats, and I think they already knew about it. I can't remember exactly what had happened because so much was happening at the time. And within a couple days, I was contacted by the FBI to kind of follow up. But it was like a spoofed number or something, and there's nothing they can do about it. So that's how a lot of this stuff works. You get these threats, and they can't do anything about it. And some of them are thinly veiled threats, but you read them, you understand, what they mean. There's not a whole lot of accountability with this political violence or political these threats. But as I said, this is the world that we live in. I understand that. And if people don't stand up against this, then we're not going to have a country left.
So one of the things that let's get into a little bit more of your platform. It sounds as if you're going to fight. You've said that repeatedly, and your background suggests that hard work and getting hit in the face literally has never deterred you in the past. You're looking for civility. You're looking for, what am I trying to say? A return to norms, perhaps, a return to ethics and character. We've talked about that a little bit. And the other people out there, the Republican Party, as I understand it, today continues to feel that their wallet will be supported by the current administration. You suggest, but before we turned on the mics, that what is actually happening by the current administration is that the current Republican Party is doing more harm than good to the wallets of Alabamians. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So whenever you have this system, I guess, that, folks have voted for just Republican for so long, the Republican leadership has now come to find out that they can do whatever they want. And so they're pushing it as far as they can, which is going to lead to their loss. You look at these tariffs, for instance, and you look at the state of Alabama. We are 49th on income. Tariffs are regressive taxes. That means that they affect lower income folks the most. That means the least amount of money or the less amount of money you make, the more it affects you because it's a larger portion of your expendable income that you're paying. So it's the opposite of an income tax. And so, these policies like tariffs, it's not just the individuals that live here. It's not just the people that live here that are being harmed. It's also the businesses. When you look at Alabama's economy, specifically Alabama's economy, you look at our automobile manufacturers and how they're having to dance around all this to deal with these tariffs. You look at the Port of Mobile, which has been expanded recently, and we are attacking our trade partners. We are shrinking our economy. We are limiting our potential to grow here in Alabama, to make it away from 49th in income, to climb that ladder. And it's not just these larger businesses. It's the small businesses get harmed worse. So, people don't know, but I'll give you a for instance on garage doors. So the panels for a residential garage door, they might be made in America, but the hinges, they're made in China. The spring hardware is made in Canada. The spring coils are either made in China or New Zealand. And there's not really anybody here to make this stuff. And so the argument is always, well, this stuff should be made in the USA. Okay, we'll go do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, do you have $100 million to set up one of these manufacturing facilities or more? Maybe. I mean, that's on a small scale end. You know, we just don't have, we've built this economy. By the way, this global economy, it is our economy. It's our economy. It's what led to our prosperity, free markets. And, you know, the old school Republican economic policies here that they've abandoned. We can't keep doing this and expect any other results than these negative results. So talking about tariffs, you know, it's not even just about the businesses getting higher prices and having to deal with this. It's also about the supply chain and the paperwork that's added and the limitations on goods that come here that we rely on. You know, when Trump came out right at the beginning of this administration and got in a spat with Colombia, a lot of folks don't know this, but in Mobile, it's just the nature of how things are. The coal that we get to power Plant Berry, which is only a portion now, we use natural gas for the majority of it, but the coal comes from Colombia. It comes through McDuffie Coal Terminal.
Yeah.
And, you know, an interruption of that, a delay of that could affect our power. It could cause outages.
Right.
And not only that, it can increase cost all the way across the board. There's all these little components. So what's happened with these tariffs, we're supposed to debate tariffs. The president is not supposed to have this much power. He pretty much has the entire economy held hostage with these tariffs. And when we can't have a debate, our states, we're giving away our representation. So when someone that is representing the state of Alabama, for one, apparently they don't know how our economy works on a face-to-face level, because if they did, maybe they would talk about this stuff, or they don't care. I don't know which one's worse. They either don't care or they don't know what's going on in our state. But, you know, when you give this power away, you've given up our country. You've given up our system. You've given up America. So one of the things that we should be doing as senators is going up there to Washington, D.C. and debating on behalf of your state, of the folks that live in your state, of the businesses that are in your state, and how it's going to affect you. So we've given this up, though, to this huge federal overreach where the representation just does not exist. There is no way on earth that no matter what you feel about Donald Trump, no matter what you feel about the new GOP, the MAGA GOP, there is no way that what they're doing is good for every single state, right? There's just no way. We have different economies. There's different things going on in each state. And this is where we're at, though. We're at this system where we don't have representation. So I want to bring that back.
I remember reading where when the tariffs were introduced, there were already 300,000 manufacturing jobs unfilled. And this was when the tariffs were introduced with the goal of bringing manufacturing back to the United States. And you're like, all right, there's 300,000 right now unfilled. What are we going to do to bring manufacturing back? It's only going to get worse with more manufacturing coming back. I've read where, in fact, I was in a conversation at a client event not long ago where a furniture manufacturer, major national furniture manufacturer chain store, went to got message somehow into the Oval Office saying, we will be happy to return furniture manufacturing that we do to the U.S. But the equipment that makes the furniture, the high quality furniture that we sell, is available only through Italy and Germany. those are the two places that manufacture this very, very high-end custom furniture equipment, manufacturing equipment. If you'll eliminate the tariffs on that equipment, we'll buy it and bring it into the U.S. and then return manufacturing for our product here. And the answer was no. We want to now make that equipment here too. So that equipment to get built is tens of millions of dollars and in years and years of ramp up to get the machine that makes a chair and the wood and shapes the wood and the furniture, et cetera. And it was just universally no. So it was an opportunity that was presented to bring manufacturing back, but was said no because of the principle of the idea. And it just seems like shooting your nose despite your face or something like that, that expression like this. So it's a rally cry that we want to bring these jobs back, but it doesn't appear to be happening. Now, there is a voice out there that says, well, it's going to take some time. It's going to take time. It's just not a switch you flip to turn on manufacturing. It's going to take time. And they're pro tariffs to force us into this evolution, this return to manufacturing in the United States. So they've said, essentially, yeah, it's going to take some time, but it'll come eventually. What is your reaction to that?
So look at 2018, steel tariffs and the data that came out of that. We lost 75,000 jobs. We gained 1,000 jobs. Okay. These tariffs aren't working the way that they're saying that they work. And you look at, as you said, some of those places where we're just not, there's no way we're going to return that. You know, it's not possible to get back to where they want us to go to. I mean, we don't have, and I can get into immigration on this. For one, we don't have some of the skills needed for some of the manufacturing. It doesn't exist. And so we would have to train folks that, by the way, don't exist. We have a people problem, especially down here in the South, with 38 workers for every 100 jobs in some field. And, you know, you look at construction, 10% of the construction industry is immigrants. Agriculture, I believe, is 8%. We've taken, what they're doing is big government. MAGA is taking the government and they're creating problems by using these tariffs. And then after they create a problem, they try to fix the problem with more government. That's not the Republican Party I know of, right?
It reminds me of the subsidies that may be coming to the soybean farmers across the United States right now. China won't buy them, the soybeans, huge customer. China won't buy them, and suddenly we're now subsidizing. I don't know if it's happened or not, but the U.S. federal government is now talking about subsidizing soybean farmers, which is what?
Socialism.
What?
Yeah, it's socialism.
Yeah.
So, MAGA socialism. So and I was going to get into that. When you think about it, it's so interesting because they've used it politically. They're against socialism, yet this is quite literally, very clearly socialism. They're taking the government, they're rigging the market, they're taking our tax money without representation. And they are basically using that potentially to bail out farmers,
right? Because
they created a problem. They destroyed their markets. So, and they've done this before. They did it back in the first term. And look, we're here again, and that's just going to go back to the national debt. We're going to be paying for it. So not only did we pay for the tariffs, when you go into the store and you buy your goods that have increased. But now, now that money isn't going anywhere that's useful. It's going to a problem that was created.
Yeah, they're causing the problem, and then having to pay to fix the problem that they caused, and it continues to go on and on. Brazil and Argentina, big soybean producers, are going, this could never have been better for us. Argentina's got its problems, but this could never have been better for us. We're selling tons of stuff that U.S. to kind of had the corner of the market on it. Tariffs are a big concern. I'm not for them. I have always been the believer in free trade. What else does your platform rely on? Part of the accusation of the Democratic Party historically, or let's not say historically, but recently has been they're the anti-party. They don't have a plan. They don't have a vision. They're just whatever the Republicans are for, they're against. What is your vision?
So I want to make life more affordable for folks. I want to actually focus on issues that affect the vast majority of people here in Alabama. And that's the economy. That's these economic issues. That's things like Social Security. I know there's an argument against this, but, it's a tax on a tax. That's the way I view it. And I know a lot of people view it that way. And when you have, Social Security, for instance, this income that's taxed with everything that's going on right now, how are our seniors supposed to survive?
Mm-hmm.
We've got to take measures as soon as possible to find a way to make it to where folks are able to get by. Because, look, I get that part of the Social Security, it's not a part of the income tax. However, Social Security in itself is a tax. I just think people deserve the full amount, especially right now. Folks need relief. So I want to give relief to some of our fixed income individuals here in the state of Alabama. I think that's huge. I want to focus on healthcare in our state and how, right now the ACA, all the issues with that. You look at lower Alabama, AL1 and AL2 are some of the highest, have the highest concentration of ACA.
You're talking about the Affordable Care Act,
yeah.
AKA Obamacare.
Yeah. And so we're going to see those tax credits end at the end of this year.
Yeah.
And so you're going to see, folks have to pay double for their health insurance. And you look at the data and I think it's 4 out of every 10 Americans, they're not going to be able to, or more, they're not going to be able to afford it. They're not going to be able to afford to have their health care. So that's a big concern for me. It's a winning point to talk on about health care, about rural hospitals and how we can get funding to these rural hospitals so folks don't have to move. When you look at, how these cuts and this attack on healthcare in the state of Alabama and how our state is, you're going to have people that instead of going 30 minutes for emergency services, let's say childbirth, they might be driving 2 hours.
Yeah.
When you already have ultra high infant mortality rates, you're going to see a higher infant mortality rate if this happens, if we continue to have more of these hospitals closed. Not just that, but, care across the board. When you look at our economy, so I'll circle back to the economy and you look at immigration. As I said before, 38 workers for every 100 jobs. That's before they started deporting folks. I think the state has had enough. I've spoke to law enforcement in our state, and the federal government is pushing in a way they're trying to make our law enforcement do things that they don't have the resources for. Whether they agree, disagree, we don't have those resources. When you go to I spoke to a fire department, and they were going to get new fire trucks. Now they can't because guess why? Tariffs. It was one cause. Their trucks went up 40%.
Wow.
40%.
Yeah.
And now I hear there's going to be another push against heavy trucks, which that hasn't came out yet. So I've got to dig into the details on that with tariffs. And I can't even imagine how that's going to affect things. So I want to focus on the economy. I want to focus on healthcare. I want to focus on common sense solutions for the state of Alabama that reach everyone in their homes. One of the things that is overlooked and I think has been done poorly by the Democratic Party has been some of these issues with wastewater, for instance, these issues with septic that relied on this federal funding that this administration called DEI, where some of this funding, federal funding to our state was going it was a minority community, and 1 out of every 3 people that was tested has a parasite, has an intestinal hookworm. And I think that is the place where the government steps in, whether you believe in big government or not. We all have to agree at some point, folks need help. And that issues like that can be fixed with a little bit of money and good oversight, we need to find a way to make sure that we fix those issues, because we don't need to be, Alabama doesn't need to be like a developing country. This is America, not a developing country, or as folks used to say, a third world country, right? We need to do better. Everything you've mentioned, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment. Everything you've mentioned is increased spending, which is historically not a Republican position, has been a historically Democrat position, which has been an easy target for Republicans to say, oh, everything you talk about costs more money. And you're now in that role as a Democrat. Everything you've just listed for me costs more money. I'm not disagreeing with the need for it, but address that. Address the entitlements and the parasites. That's awful, and it does seem like that would be a relatively inexpensive fix compared to some of the larger government bills that are out there. But talk to me about fiscal responsibility, because everything you've said was a cost. We have to grow our economy. Bottom line, the obsession over cutting everything. While we need to be careful about what we spend, but we need to grow our economy instead of cutting our economy, instead of shrinking our economy, instead of getting rid of our trade partners. We need to find ways to grow our economy, have the economy of the future. My wife and I, we went to Japan for one of our anniversaries. We were supposed to go our 10th year anniversary. We didn't have the money at the time. Then COVID and all this stuff happened. So we ended up going, a couple years ago, or a year or two ago. When I went over there and I saw how they have high-speed rail and how they've got their stuff together there, it made my stomach sink. Yeah. Why don't we have this stuff? It's time for us to move forward. It's time for us to streamline construction processes. It's time for us to look at things in the year 2025 and to start building stuff. I think the Democratic Party has a perfect opportunity to say, hey, look, we can get things done. You look at the I-10 bridge, and all this holdup. For one, we get projects finished. We focus in on these projects. We find ways to cut the red tape. We find ways to grow our economy. And that is going to take some spending. That is going to take pushing our infrastructure forward. Talking about some cuts. When you look at what ICE is doing, ICE got, I think, for immigration detention, they got $45 billion from this administration. That's a big chunk. It may be a drop in the bucket compared to the rest, but you look at what they're doing with it. They're basically using it to attack part of our economy. I mean, we start out by shooting ourselves in the feet, right? We start out by doing things in a way that makes sense. If we have 38 workers for every 100 jobs, and there's folks out there doing work in 100-degree weather that we don't have people for, and the thing is, you can't just put people seeds in the ground and then the next day you've got a 30-year-old that has 12 years of experience working in construction. That's not how it works. People think that it works that way. It doesn't work that way. And if you hear some of these contractors, I believe one out of Mobile was in a Reuters article where he did an interview and he was saying the same thing. Like, you don't understand what's going on. There's no one to replace some of these folks that are being deported. So what we're doing is we're spending a ton of money. These guys are getting massive bonuses with little experience, these ICE guys. And they're, carrying out unconstitutional acts. So, for one, we rein stuff like that in. And I think that's something to look at. How is this helping our country? It's not helping our country. I'm all for very strong borders, the strongest borders. I'm all for deporting criminals. Absolutely. Folks that are, violent criminals, folks that do bad things. But the folks that came here, they're doing a job that we don't have people that exist to do. We should be compassionate towards these people, not spending money to destroy ourselves. Yeah. And that's the interpretation that you have. And I don't disagree of what's going on out there. The immigration, that workforce is needed. And I agree with you that the border needs to be tight. The rules need to be tight. But that workforce is needed. And just to be honest, the Democrats had
lots of opportunities over the years to address this, and it waffled and wallowed and everything. And I think the reaction has been, all right, we've been talking about this for 15 years. It's time for a dramatic reaction. And that's what Trump very much did. But it's an interesting concept that to build the economy, we need this labor. And what we're doing is sending this labor home, thereby impacting the economy. Do you know if we've seen that in the numbers yet? Has the economy reflected that this workforce that we need is no longer available?
Well, some articles have came out already, I think in the past month or so, that have said that construction industry and I think a couple other industries are facing recession-like conditions. And, looking at that, I can say that people are probably spending a lot less money on upgrades for their homes.
Yeah.
And that's usually an indicator when you work in construction, your thumb is on the economy in a way that most people, will never have their thumb on the economy. So a lot of times when there's a blip, you feel it, you see it a couple months before it's even reported.
Yeah. We're moving into an hour here, and I'd love, let's kind of move to wrap it up. Give me a sense of, when I work with my clients on their communication skills programs, which I do from time to time, it's like your customer, I tell them, wants to see your soul. They want to see just a little bit about who you are. Show us your soul, I say to my students. Show me your soul. Tell me who you are. And you're going to find, I tell them, that when you're able to do that, people tend to very much be attracted to you by showing them a little bit about your vulnerabilities. Tell me who Kyle Sweetser is, and this is a very typical political question, but what do people need to know about you? So you've expressed your work, you've expressed, and I love it, that you have been punched in the nose a number of times. Tell me a little bit about the guy that we'll see in Washington, D.C., if you make it all the way.
Well, I'm doing this in large part for my family, for my wife, for our state. My wife is half Thai. And so kind of hearing how the fabric of our society has been torn apart by this rhetoric, specifically on immigration. To me, this is something that I have to do. I feel like it's essential for the future to have folks that work to unwind the direction that we're going in, where folks are becoming openly, xenophobic in ways that they're against their community members. I care deeply about the family business, and my parents and what they had built from nothing. So to see they are able to adapt because they're workaholics. But to also imagine that if they fell ill, and they weren't, my parents or myself weren't able to physically put their hands on everything, especially through things like tariffs, then they wouldn't, there wouldn't be a way to make it really. And so when you see a couple folks go out of business because they don't have a support group of their family, and they're good people down here in lower Alabama, like I said, it's a calling for me.
Yeah.
To see the government basically destroy businesses with their policies and to just not care about it. And not only that, but the people that they're hurting are the people that voted for them.
Yeah.
And so I want to stand up against that. But yeah, I'm very family oriented, family focused. My wife's my best friend. My kids are homeschooled. After COVID, we kind of experimented with that, and my wife loved it. My son's 17. My daughter, she's 14. Just being able to have that opportunity has been great for us, especially with all the political stuff going on, to be close to our kids. I think that It's one of the best things that happened to us with COVID, out of COVID, taking our own responsibility over what our kids, take in or don't take in. And so we're able to let them live a life where they can come up with their own ideas and freedom. And I think that's really important. I think that's something that we've given up, and it does sort of start with school. Folks need to have a great education. But we need to be free thinkers. We need to be independent. I think that's really, really important. We don't need to completely give away all of our individuality, but we also need to work in a collective at the same time, to get things done. So that's important to me. Freedom is huge to me. I live 1.5 miles down a dirt road. When all this stuff started happening, I purchased some land. It was a bank foreclosure. I got it.
What do you mean, this stuff?
Oh, the Trump stuff, the chaos, and then COVID, after that. But so I built a house. I was a contractor for my own house. I built a lot of it on my own. I actually slept in a metal building out there that I also built. Many nights I'd literally sleep for 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours. I had a bathtub in there I filled with hot water. And when it got cold, I'd wake up. And I did that for about a year. I was working multiple hurricanes at the same time. And anyways, I built my own house. And so I'd go out there, like every block, every piece of my fireplace, I did myself without any other help. So a lot of that house I built on my own because I like having my hands on things, and I like making sure that things get done right. Okay, so that's something that's important to me. But I built a house in the middle of the woods, away from everything, thinking that, what, I can just get away from it all. But I couldn't.
You couldn't let it go.
Yeah, I just couldn't do it.
You couldn't disengage. You sound like me. You had to, the calling was too strong for you to turn your back on it.
Yep.
Yeah. But you're going from a guy who's been in the I'm going to use my hands to create something business, whether it's a fireplace or a garage door or the house way out in the country. You're going from a guy that has used his hands to create his environment to a guy that's now got to sell ideas, sell emotion. You can show somebody your brick fireplace and say, I know how to do this. But now you're trying to sell emotion. You're trying to sell hope. You're trying to sell a return to decorum. And you cannot put your hands on that. It's a whole different sell. You're smiling at me right now. You must have felt some of this frustration. At the same time, you're a guy that had to react. You had to do something. But now you're dealing in concept and not brick and garage doors.
Well, as I said, all of my political training comes from talking to people.
Yeah.
So that was just something that came over a decade or more since I was younger, going in places where people are comfortable and talking to them about things. And sometimes people have, maybe an opinion that's pretty radical. And I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
And one of the hobbies that I had was trying to engage with folks and pull them away from their radical ideas. So it's something that I've always done with work. I've always been a big talker on jobs. If somebody wants to, hang out with me and watch me and talk to me while I'm working, absolutely. I will talk to you the whole time. And that's, like I said, that's how I've learned a lot about the state of Alabama, the people that live here, and what's really below the surface, which I saw was getting pretty dark. That's a major reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, because it is affecting our society. You see the things that people post online, and they tell you not to read the comments, but I will tell you, some things that people say in their homes is worse than what's online.
Yeah.
So, and people everyone is redeemable. And I think that we need to make sure, especially in the state of Alabama, the Democratic Party, who's been very welcoming to me. So that's great. But even maybe the people that they view or that you may view as the worst, you should never give up on somebody. And I'm never going to give up on every voter in the state of Alabama. I'm never going to give up on trying to make sure that we have common ground so everyone can be represented in our state instead of this one party rule that is now, because of the nature of that, there's no accountability, has pretty much abandoned our state to the president, the executive office.
Yeah, to the Oval Office. And you're so right about that. Kyle, you've got my best wishes. You've got a big road ahead of you. You've got a lot of windshield time ahead of you. Living in the bottom left corner of a tall, long state makes driving a necessity evil, at least some sort of travel to get to all the corners of this state of ours. But my goodness, man, I love it that you built your own little Idaho out in the corner right on the Mississippi border. And you said, I'll just be fine out here. But you couldn't be still. You had to raise your hand and get involved. And you've not taken a small step to get involved. You've taken a big step to get involved. And for that, I salute you. Congratulations, my friend, on your decision. And you've got a voice here on my modest little podcast whenever you need it. I'd love to support you in that regard.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Where can people find out about you, Kyle?
Yeah, so you can go to my website at kyleforalabama.com. I'm also across social media, Kyle for Alabama. And so whenever you type that in, just make sure that you spell 4 and not the number 4.
Number 4. Yeah. Do you get something else?
No, I don't know. I hope not.
It's going to be FOR, Kyle for Alabama, Kyle Sweetser. Thank you, Kyle. Best of luck. You're listening to What's Working, folks. We'll wrap this up in just a moment or two with some short comments about Kyle, his conversation, my impressions, and what you can expect coming up. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm Cam Marston. Many business leaders like you are facing declining sales, high turnover, low morale, all because of poor communication. That's why I created the Generational Insights Communications Academy. The Academy trains your leaders to communicate effectively with anyone in any situation, helping you build the thriving company you deserve. Learn more and enroll today at cammarston.com/GICA. I think the word I'm looking for here is earnest. Kyle is very earnest about his beliefs and his hopes for the state of Alabama, his hopes for a return to something in the United States. And I got that very distinct impression as he was talking. I could see it in his eyes that he was an earnest believer in what should be happening out there. And I felt it in him, and I can sure relate to this person that he is, and that I just got to do something, he said. I tried to move away and disengage and say, this is not for me. I bought property on the edge of the state. I built an isolated position out there for myself, but I couldn't not get involved. And boy, I can relate to that in so many ways. He's got a tough road ahead of him. He knows that. I'm not saying anything out of turn. He's got a tough road ahead of him. There is the belief across our state and across much of the nation that this Republican Party is the best solution, regardless of what they see and read and feel. It's who we are. I'm talking about individually. I am a Republican, and therefore I'm going to continue to vote this way. Yet continuously we see that the best interests of the people that are voting for the party are not being reflected back to them, both statewide and nationally, as well as perhaps locally. I'm not in the position to say that, but that's worth consideration. Anyway, his was an earnest approach, and I wish him the best of luck in his campaign. I do wish, and there's a part of me, and you'll hear this on upcoming shows, that perhaps he had chosen an independent route. That is a decision that he made. There are people that will not vote for a Democrat, regardless of what they believe. They just can't do it. So perhaps if he had gone an independent route, he would have attracted those votes a little bit. On the other side, the Democrat structure has people in place that will help him, that will give him money as long as he's affiliated with that party. I wish there were a third party. I wish there were an option, and that will be a focus of an upcoming show. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is taking a different tone from time to time as we dip our toe into politics, and particularly my dissatisfaction with the way things are out there. And you'll hear that upcoming. We'll have another What's Working here before too long. We'll talk to you soon.